Meet Andy. His eyes snap open to the sound of little feet thudding in the hallway. He overslept. Again. He stumbles out of bed, throws on yesterday's hoodie, and rushes to prepare toast while helping his daughter find her missing backpack. His toddler is crying in the kitchen because the banana broke in half. His wife gives him a look that says, "Really? Another morning like this?" 10 minutes later, he slips into the basement office, coffee sloshing onto his notebook. His laptop is already pinging with messages. His first meeting of the day, he turns the camera off because he knows he looks like a mess. Andy is smart, really smart. He's a software program manager who has years of experience, a team that looks to him for leadership, and a desire to lead at the next level. But lately, he feels like he can barely keep it together. And one of his big problems is that he never asks for help because he doesn't want to be perceived as weak, and he also doesn't want to ever bother anyone else. Instead, he keeps everything in his head: deadlines, client updates, team issues, performance goals. He isolates himself, and it's starting to show. Missed follow-ups, late decisions, and awkward interactions in meetings where he should speak up but doesn't, and then later he overthinks what he should have said. It's like he's running a mental marathon with no finish line. He wants to lead with more confidence, to engage more, to be sharper, more impactful, but with his disorganized mornings and his constant work throughout the day, he doesn't see how. And look, Andy's not lazy. He's just stuck in the repetition of staying within his own comfort zone. His comfort zone of just getting by and figuring it out all on his own. But he's starting to realize that that's not going to work anymore, not for what he wants to accomplish. Today, I'm speaking with Henna Pryor, workplace performance expert, global keynote speaker, and author of Good Awkward. Henna works with leaders like Andy to help them get out of the safe zone and into the stretch zone where growth really happens. Her work is grounded in science-based strategies to help leaders build mental and social fitness so they can communicate more effectively, take more risks, and level up their performance. And I'm eager to hear how Henna would help someone like Andy to go from hesitation to action, and to make that shift from just getting by with their work to being the type of leader that truly engages with others and has a significant positive impact. My name is Jay Abbasi, and welcome to Unstuck. Real people, real stories, real solutions. While the details are changed to protect anonymity, what you just heard is based on a true story of challenges that come up in the real world. And we discuss how to navigate these environments with practical tips to help you get unstuck and build a more fulfilling, impactful, and balanced life and career. So Henna, you were crushing it as a recruiter for quite some time. You were shattering records. You were top 10% of your company every year. And then you left. Why? Why did you choose to leave all of that behind when you were having so much success?
Kicking and screaming, to be clear. It wasn't exactly this, okay, it's time and I'm 100% sure and it's, off to the races with entrepreneurship. It did not go anything like that. I probably thought about it for about 2 full years before I decided to do anything with it. And the reason it took me 2 full years to do anything about it is for the reasons you just described. On paper, I had the dream. I had the gig. I had a job that was flexible with me while my kids were young. My income at that point was nothing to sneeze at. I had the respect of my peers. I had loyal clients. Frankly, I was Henna, the top performer in that industry in my region for years. And the idea of leaving that all behind felt insane, especially when there's people on this earth that, can barely pay their bills and are really in difficult jobs. And so for a long time, I let that guilt or shame of like, how could I leave such a perfect gig on paper behind keep me there? But ultimately, there was 2 years of a voice inside of my belly just kind of saying, hey, you are destined to do more than this. You have outgrown this. You're good at it, but you know how to do it. You're no longer challenged. There's nobody really helping you get to your next level of success, whatever that feels like for you. And the only way to find that is by leaving this behind. And so I did it, but I did it probably with the biggest clench in my belly on earth. And a whole lot of self-belief that whatever I would do next would get me back to a lot of those same benefits and feelings with time.
Yeah. So there was kind of this battle going on, right? This battle that says, in one side, it's like, you got something good. You got that. Also, for me, I don't know if this happens for you, but my upbringing also is like, I can hear my mother's voice. Like, you right? You had that going on, right?
Yeah.
And then it's, but there's this pull, right? Okay. So for this pull, right? You said you're destined for more. I guess what was really like the fuel of like, okay, to do what with, or to make what kind of impact? Like, what was it that was kind of pulling you to say, I can do this if on my own? What is this?
Yeah, this actually, I'll be honest, it didn't figure itself out right away. I'll tell you what I did know. What I knew is, so my career was executive search and staffing. I was in that role for 14 years. I was a headhunter, direct hire, helping candidates find jobs with my clients. So I worked both sides of the desk. I worked with leaders and I worked with candidates who were looking to find jobs. And it was a sales job in its most simplistic terms. I was 100% commissions. So that's how I was compensated. But it is very heavily an understanding people job, right? So when you think about what are three of the biggest decisions people make in their life, it's their job, house, and spouse. Okay, number one on that list is job. Where are they going to spend their time? How are they going to spend their majority of their lives, their day at this career, at this job? And so I had a very deep interest in not just making a lot of phone calls or sending a lot of emails, but really understanding what made people tick, what made people successful in their careers, both the people who were applying or looking for jobs, but also what made the leaders who are really good at attracting talent or keeping talent, meaning there was rarely openings on their teams because people didn't leave, right? So I got very curious about learning their perspective too. And it was that deep interest in understanding what made humans successful performers at work, and then the inverse, what made things not work or fall apart, that became a bit of my obsession. And I used that to help me be more effective in this matchmaking that I did in search and staffing. But I realized there was a whole discipline of that. And it was after probably 5 or 10 clients said to me, Henna, you're our search partner, but we really should pay you for all the executive coaching that you do for us. That was my first clue. I said, I'm sorry, what? What's that? What do I do for you that you're not paying me for? Can you please say more? Right? I didn't even know
that you think people would pay me for.
Right? Like, I'm unclear on this term that you're using, and that was actually the first, let's say, sprinkle of seedling of this thing that I had a gift in, or potentially a strength that I had an opportunity to further develop. That became that first thread that I started to pull on of the this that I was destined for more.
Yeah. And then you were saying how, it wasn't just about the phone calls and the outreach and all that, but it's about what you were able to oftentimes even see in people. And I think I saw this on your website. You said something about, okay, a leader may not be repelling, but you're also not very compelling, right? So talk to me about that. Like, what do you see in those people that are so compelling, where they attract talent and they're able to lead others and people want to follow them?
Yeah, I think what I started to feel, and I don't want to paint with too broad a brush, but with leaders and leadership development work, there was a lot of emphasis on, don't do these things, right? Don't micromanage, don't, measure the wrong parts of productivity, right? Calls don't mean quality calls. It was all these like, don't do this, don't do that. And so leaders would spend a lot of time, effort, and energy on paying consultants or search partners on the things that were procedural, or like, how do we do these certain things better? But then I would find that the leaders who did a phenomenal job at keeping their teams or, building their teams, expanding their teams, were not necessarily the ones who were hyper-focused on all the things they shouldn't be doing. They were putting a lot of effort into not what makes this company attractive or this team attractive, what makes me an attractive human to work for? Wait, what makes this team a place where they want to be? And all of those things really are not the metrics that go on the board or any of those things that are easy to measure. They really lie in some of those soft skills like transparency and vulnerability and the words we choose to communicate with and the quick fashion in which we address a mistake. All of these little levers that I think at the time were starting to get some attention, but not to the degree that they needed. And some of it, even when it was getting attention, felt a bit complicated. And I'll be honest, a little woo-woo. Like I would find these leaders saying, I know I need to work on my emotional intelligence, my EQ. So they know the value of it. They don't disagree with the value of it, but then execution was still a struggle. They were still saying things like, I know I need to be more vulnerable at work, but this is really hard for me, team. And the team is like, no, it's not, Joe. Like, you don't look like you're in any pain over this, right? So there's just this dissonance. And so I think I got very curious about what is that disconnect? Where is that gap? And could I potentially add some value in that gap? The things that I know are important, but in a way that feels easy to grab onto and relatable. How do I make the complex feel more simple? And that's where a lot of that work really started.
Yeah. And there's in the story with Andy, it's always based on a real person, by the way. And the person of whom I worked with that struggled was one of the most like knowledgeable, read people that I met. He read book after book, and it relates to one of the things I read that you say, and that is the world isn't short on ideas, it's short on execution. And you were just talking about that now. It's like people know oftentimes what to do, they just don't do it. So what gets in the way of execution? Why do people who know it, who's smart people, they just don't put it into practice?
So I think the answer lies in a few places, but I would say the number one thing that I personally have experienced that I think informs the way I work with my clients is it's a really deep level of self-awareness and understanding about their own blocks. And so I'll just give you a very specific example to me. It can be one conversation, one insight that can drastically change the course of someone's life, their leadership, the way they interact with a team. I like every other human being, have some natural fears around, what type of leader I'm going to be as a speaker. I'm on a public forum, on a stage where I could be, regularly attacked and trolled for my ideas. It happens increasingly by the day. And that's still a human thing. But I was working with one of my own coaches about just trying to think about ways to up-level my own performance. Right? How can I perform at my peak without burning myself out? I think I have a tendency for workaholism and people pleasing and some things that I've worked on very hard. And she said something to me that still to this day I think about constantly. She said, Henna, you're not afraid of failing. You don't like the idea of failing, right? But you're not afraid of making a mistake publicly or failing. You seem like you could recover from that and, your potential will still be met through that. And I said, yeah, that feels right. That feels fair. And then she said, but you're deathly afraid of not meeting your imagined potential. That's the sound I made. Right?
Yeah,
I was like, what did you just say? Right? That's hit.
Powerful.
It hit because it was exactly right. It was on the nose. I'm not afraid of failing, but what will keep me up at night, what will keep me people pleasing or overworking or in perfectionist tendency is not my fear of failing. It's this fear of not meeting this potential version of myself that I see that can exist, right? This capability that I see way up there in the distance, that will keep me in overwork or that will keep me out of my peak potential. And so once I learned that about myself, my entire measurement system on how I define success, the entire way that I started to look at the way I led or the way I created, it shifted. And so I think there's a lot of leaders, high performers, entrepreneurs who, again, can be given the tools. They have a bias for action. But if there's some mental block that's underneath that they don't quite yet understand about themselves, it's going to be difficult. The action and the tools can only go so far if understanding like that deep-rooted motivation, if that isn't happening yet, then that's the first place to start.
Yeah. It reminds me of a little acronym that I heard once from Tony Robbins. And it is CANI, which is CANI, constant and never-ending improvement. And with constant, never-ending improvement, it's the way I understand it now is it's not I need more tools and more tools, it's more and more tools. What I need is more self-awareness. I need to be able to have this obsessive perspective that is, where are my blocks? Where am I falling short? Why do I keep falling into this pattern? Because through that insight, then it gets revealed what adjustments I need to make.
Right. And sometimes optimization, and speaking about myself right now, if anybody else can relate, sometimes optimization means doing a lot of nothing. Right. For me, I can optimize by being busy and doing all day long. That is my default mode. But for me, I've learned that true optimization means actually doing less or incorporating more rest. And so I think it's also like the humility to define what this quote unquote optimization means. Listen, this is not hating on these people, but like if I have to watch another, bro in the morning at 4:30 with their green juice and their cold plunge and 40 push-ups before my alarms, I get up early, y'all. My kid's bus comes early. So this is not me hating on mornings or anything, but please, optimization is not the same for everyone. For some people, there's something that, we have natural clock wiring. For some people, 4:30 is not an hour where they do their best work or their best physical work. Like, that is actually biologically not the case for everyone. And so I think understanding both our own inner motivation and drive, but also the most powerful strength that we can all develop in this modern era where information overload is just at a level we've never seen before, is discernment. Like, what does optimization look like for you? Not for the person whose video you're watching, not for your friend. What does optimization look like for you? And that comes from that awareness, which can then turn into that discernment. If we can all do that, we'll be better off.
I love that you brought this up because I recently shared a story in my newsletter about how recently I wanted to get up at 4:30, but it wasn't because of some bro Instagram video. It was
fine.
It was because I genuinely needed to get more done. Like, I was traveling and I needed to get up. And I told myself I got to get up at 4:30, but I got to bed late because, as you know, sometimes the flight you get back after being at the airport, and so it's 4:30. My alarm goes off, and Henna, I'm exhausted. There's no way my body is going to move right now.
Right.
And in that moment, if it were 10 years ago, 8 years ago, I would have been upset with myself. I would have been disappointed. My day would have been affected. How come you couldn't get up? You should have got up. You're lazy. You're not like that person on the YouTube video that's crushing their morning routine. But what I instead did, because I feel like I've learned this about myself, I lied in my bed and I thought to myself, this is amazing. This is exactly what I need. I am so happy. I am so grateful laying in this bed. I am doing the right thing. And guess what? It ended up working out okay. I still got what I needed to get done. I found a way, but I know that if I force myself to wake up just because of that idea, like you were saying, of what I should be, then I would have been in a terrible state throughout the day. It would have had more of a negative impact than a positive one.
Right. That's exactly right. I think, again, it's not an attack on 4:30. It's what is the motivation. So my husband for years went to CrossFit at 5 a.m. So he left the house at 4:30, didn't love it, but the motivation was strong enough because by being part of that class, him and the 5 a.m. crew are all best friends, right? So for him, there was a motivation to go be part of the community, part of something bigger. I personally, I'm very self-motivated. I'm very disciplined. That is not my hour. There is no amount of friends that are going to get me in any kind of happy state in that morning. So I still, I focus on my health. I focus on my fitness. I just do it in an hour that works well for me. So I think what you have pointed to is the underlying truth, which is, discernment. Does this work for you? Does it feel sustainable? Does it feel like something that you, even if you don't do it every day, that you occasionally look forward to? Then have at it, right? Have at it. But we should be careful not to define our success by somebody else's filter. I think that's dangerous.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. Know thyself, right? Anyone listening, know yourself. What you're hearing from Henna, from me, from other people on this podcast or other books or whatever, it works for them. It's good to learn. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for you. I had to ask you about your book, Good Awkward, and you talk about awkwardness.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that you have. It's on the page where you can get more info about the book. Is highlighted, and I wrote it, and it was, don't eliminate awkwardness, condition for it instead. And I was going to ask you to just talk about that because I got curious. What do you mean by that? Tell me more.
Yeah. So I wish I had thought of this metaphor before I wrote the book, but I'm going to actually explain it in a way that's new. I had the privilege of speaking for the second year at South by Southwest in Austin this year. And one of the South by Southwest darlings is Amy Webb. She's a futurist. And she actually describes this phenomenon that we're about to talk about in a way that I thought is beautiful. She refers to it as the stone in your shoe syndrome. So what does I mean about don't eliminate awkwardness, condition for it instead? We cannot eliminate any kind of discomfort right now. So right now we are in technological super change. We've never seen anything like this, the rate of technological change. We've now got 5 generations working in the workforce full-time, 6 if you count summer interns this year. So 6 generations working in the workforce together that all are very different in their operating model, the way they've grown up, what they've grown up with. We've got, political, geopolitical, global change happening at a rate that we can barely keep up with. Our heads are on a swivel. And all of this, while we as human beings are still trying to make conversation, are trying to, meet our teammates who are sometimes in person, sometimes virtual. We're trying to have difficult conversations in a world that keeps optimizing for smoothness. So today, if I didn't want to talk to anyone, I could DoorDash my lunch. I could Instacart my groceries. I'm married, but I could swipe to find a date, right? I could do all these things that don't require me to speak to a soul. I could text and Slack my teammates, my friends. I don't actually have to speak to anyone. And so all of us now living in this climate, we've become optimized for the structures that have been created. So to reach out proactively and just say, Jay, hey, just wanted to call you. I haven't talked to you in a while. How you been? Right? That actually takes more activation energy and effort than it ever used to make. If we don't go to the grocery store, we don't bump into people. We don't smile and ask how your day was, right? These just don't happen as often because we've got these structures. So this stone in your shoe metaphor is essentially pointing to the idea that everything feels uncomfortable right now. We all have a permanent stone in our shoe, but here's the issue. It's not leaving. Like the stone in our shoe is here to stay. We cannot eliminate this particular stone in our shoe. We cannot eliminate awkwardness. It is a social emotion of discomfort. It happens when something goes sideways in front of other people, which despite all the technology, we don't typically work alone. Unless you're an astronaut, unless you're a polar explorer, unless you're in prison, you are typically not in solitude all the time. So we have to get used to it instead. We have to condition for it instead, meaning we need to strengthen our muscles. If it was a physical stone in your shoe, your foot would eventually adapt around the stone. It sounds painful about how long that would take, but that's what would happen eventually. In the same way, we need to create some muscle, some strength to endure all of the awkwardness that all of this change is going to build because there's no outrunning it. We now just need to get stronger. So that's what the thing refers to.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like being in the ocean and there's so many waves and the currents keep changing and you're just hoping that the current will calm down and it never will.
Nope.
Right.
Nope.
And the best thing you could do is either work on being a better swimmer or build a boat that could handle the constant tumultuous current and waves, right?
Correct. Yeah. And I think that the waves analogy, even for people who are like, okay, well, I do know how to swim. We need to learn how to swim differently even than before, right? We are now in an ocean after a storm, has blown through for a while. And so even strong swimmers are finding themselves in uncharted waters. So it's really a goal for everyone to become more comfortable. Again, not because any of us are inherently looking to weaken our mental and social muscles. None of us want that. But the environment the environment has made it so that these repetitions really don't happen anymore unless we create space for them, unless there's an intentionality, hence the term conditioning, right? We don't generally, yes, we occasionally lift a heavy box at home. Yes, we occasionally have to move something that's heavy, push a piece of furniture, but we know that that's generally not enough to be physically fit.
Yeah.
So we pick up some weights, or we go on walks, or we go to the gym. Our social strength building now has to be treated the same way.
Yeah.
It's not enough to just wait for it to happen.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, there was a time when human beings didn't have a choice. They had to exercise.
Right.
Because you had to travel long distances and you had to gather food. But now we create these systems for ourselves where we force ourselves into exercise because we recognize the health benefit. So in the same way you said we need to do that socially. So how do you help people to do that? Like, okay, someone hears that and says, all right, Henna, I'm with you, but every day I find that it's so easy for me to stay in my comfort zone. It's hard for me to really push myself to do it. What are some tips, some ways in which you would encourage someone to take those steps even when feeling the discomfort in doing it?
Yeah, there's a few tactical things, but I want to make a distinction as I share them. There's a great article in The Atlantic called The Antisocial Century, written by Derek Thompson. And one of the distinctions he makes, which I think is brilliant, is, when we think about the things we need to be doing socially, we often make the association with loneliness. But what his research actually found, which I feel is super true, is people aren't necessarily lonely. And that's what keeps, them in a state. If they were lonely, our human wiring would be like, you know what, I really need to get out and talk to somebody. They're not necessarily lonely. They're very comfortable in their aloneness. So they're alone, but they're not lonely, right? They're comfortable in their aloneness, which is exactly what you've just described. So how do we get someone out of it? Well, a couple of different things. Number one is really just having the conversations more and more about the recognition of what's being lost by constantly choosing the DoorDash, or constantly texting instead of calling, or constantly declining the coffee invitation. Right? We see these things as sometimes inconvenience. I'll be honest, I had a really busy week at work last week, and my girlfriend, who's so good about trying to stay connected, was like, we need to find time for coffee. And my first instinct was, oh God, I have so much work stuff going on. Like, I don't know how I'm going to squeeze this in, which is a true statement. And then my second thought was, what am I doing this all for? If it's for money that sits in the bank while I sit by myself? No, again, I have a husband and kids, so I'm not really often by myself, but what is it for then? If it's not to create space for the people that I supposedly care about? And so I said, you know what? Let's put something on the calendar, because then it will force me to rearrange my work schedule around this thing that I say matters to me, right? Friendship. Yeah. And so just rethinking, what does it mean? Are you lonely? Are you alone? If you don't feel lonely, I'm not shocked. That's not really always the big issue. It's how comfortable are you in your aloneness. But 9 times out of 10, and research corroborates this, when even the person who's comfortable in their aloneness spends a little bit of quality time with someone in good conversation, 9 times out of 10, they're like, oh my God, that was awesome. Even introverts, right? Oh my God, I needed that. My heart filled up, right? That felt so good. It's that activation energy, though, then to do it again and to do it again. And so when we think about that activation energy, this is where that strength building comes in. Because again, going to the gym, if I haven't done it in 2 years and then I try to pick up a weight, that sucks, right? That feels heavier than ever because I haven't done it lately. But if you continue to pick up small, lighter weights over time, then going back to the gym, picking up a slightly heavier weight's not going to feel as awful. Same thing with our social muscles. If you can at least get in the habit, even during your busiest weeks of working from home, if that's what you do, to, step out to the coffee shop for 5 minutes and just strike up a conversation with the barista, right? Don't use the self-checkout line at the grocery store. Strike up a bit of a conversation with your grocery cashier. Say hello to a neighbor if you happen to see somebody outside. It sounds ridiculous. And it sounds like table stakes, but what I tell people is these are those little social push-ups that keep you fresh, that keep your energy activation of what this feels like to initiate something high so that when something bigger crosses the desk, it doesn't feel like you're lifting such a heavy weight. It feels a little easier to manage, but we have to keep it as a consistent effort daily and not a once in a while thing.
I really like the way you discerned loneliness from aloneness, or the sense of I feel so isolated, I feel so alone, is not necessarily what's going to drive someone, right? Because they're not thinking that. But what I find, I work with people all the time who they're feeling stuck. They're not where they want to be. They feel just in states of anxiety or overwhelm, whatever it is. And it's amazing, Henny, how many times the encouragement I give them to be proactive in connecting with others, even though they don't even connect the dot yet. Like they haven't figured out that why would this be something that helps me? I encourage them to, and they come, and it's the game changer for them. It creates the transformation. It's just
every time.
I've just been reaching out to more people. I've been having more conversations. Jay, I don't feel as stuck as I used to feel. They haven't gotten any but they haven't gotten any like clarity work as to what their next big goals are or whatever it was. It was just that they weren't exercising that muscle.
Yeah. And interestingly, I love that you prescribe this. Interestingly, in this moment in time that we live in right now, we're increasingly seeing people turning to AI companions, right? For advice. They'll turn to, I call him Chatty G, her, him, it, Chatty G. They'll turn to Chatty G and say, what should I do? Right? I need some advice. And that, for people who are struggling with the activation energy, is an easy out, right? An easy conversation partner. But here's what's desperately missing from turning to an AI tool. An AI tool has no needs. Humans have needs, and an AI tool does not. So the AI tool may help meet some of our needs, but it is uniquely human for us to want to help meet the other person's needs. And that part is entirely eliminated. AI cannot disagree with us. It cannot reject us. It is there in a non-argumentative, holding space way, but we cannot discern, well, what does AI need from me? It doesn't need anything. It doesn't have any needs. Similarly, this is where it falls short. It can't read nuance. So I can say to you right now, Jay, you say, how was your week last week? And I say, it was pretty good. Yeah, it was pretty good. So again, I can type, it was pretty good into AI and it will discern, but you heard something very different in my voice, in my energy, in my body. And you as a friend might stop and say, okay, well, your voice went pretty funny just then. And you kind of hesitated. So what's going on there, right? AI can't do that. It can't hear that. It can't see the fact that my eyes were flitting about when I gave you that answer. And so there are things that uniquely human connection provides for us, that feeling seen, feeling understood, that AI still has its limitations on. It can be a supplement, but we have to be very careful not to let it become a substitute, or we're in for a world of really difficult conversation and communication in the years to come.
Yeah. And it sounds similar to the research. Was it Adam Grant who just his book where it was all about the common thing he sees in people who are happy, who are content, is that they give.
Mm-hmm. Meaning, he has a book that the give and take. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And so in that, it's about how when you help somebody else to meet their needs, it has such a fulfillment. It gives you such fulfillment in being able to serve that person. And you're saying in an AI tool, you'll never have that component.
No, AI might, and I use quotes liberally here, might get you because it's good at, detecting the patterns of the things that you said it, but you don't get the honor, the privilege of getting it back. Right? Of seeing something that was underneath that other people wouldn't see. I mean, just think for a moment how good it feels when someone really sees you and can reflect back to you something that you would struggle to see in yourself. Again, ChatGPT may to a degree, or other AI tools may to a degree be able to do that. And sometimes it blows my mind with the way that it can read me, but I don't get to do that back. And that is a unique part of human communication and conversation. It's not one way. We get to be in relationship with each other, not just one way.
And Henna, it's something that I see in every person I've ever worked with. It's
Mhm.
fascinating. It's the most common theme. I speak to people all the time and I ask them questions such as, in the end, what is the impact that you really want to have? What's the
Mhm.
legacy you want to leave? And Henna, in almost every one of those conversations, someone says, I want to help others.
Mhm.
Everyone, like at their core, when I've gone through every question, when I get to their deeper meaning of what it is that they want to do with their life, it's to give, it's to serve. And it's fascinating that that's what's underneath all that cloud cover of all their thoughts and their stresses and their anxieties. Yet it is not something that is activated with intention because the society that we're in doesn't really advocate for it. It doesn't give us the easy
Right.
channels to do so, right?
Right. I mean, it's, I imagine there's versions of I want to help others. I want to feel that, people to know that I cared about them. I want,
Yeah.
want to love and be loved. None of those things are isolationist activities. They just
Right.
aren't. And yet we keep designing our lives around isolation. So we did a research study that came out a few months ago. And one of the things we found in the study was 30% of working Americans would rather clean a toilet than ask for help.
Wow.
I mean, that one knocked me off our feet. I said, really? Adult working Americans. And then I was on a news segment in New York. And for fun, they did a little, interview beforehand with a bunch of people on the streets of New York asking this very question. Same thing. Same thing. The data shook out again. People were like, ooh, clean a toilet. I hate asking for help. This is how deeply we've started to become, independent to the point of individualism, where we will not rely on each other. We will not tap each other. And again, I think people do it in the spirit of being strong and self-sufficient. But what we forget is how good it makes the other person feel. When someone who, values my opinion says, Henna, I really admire the way you did X, and I'm trying to accomplish something similar. It depends how they ask, right? But I have a few specific questions for you that I would love your advice on. Do you mind giving me 5 minutes of your time? It makes me feel so good to be able to help them. And yet, if I wasn't willing to also ask something like that, I would be robbing people of that same good feeling. Like, who am I
Yeah.
to rob people of that good feeling? So we tend to be a bit paradoxical about our own behavior, even when it comes to that stuff.
Yeah. I have that conversation with people at least once a week. At least once a week, I have this one conversation with people. It always goes like this. They say, Jay, I'm looking for a new job, but I don't want to call out my network because I don't want to ask them for help. I don't
Bother
want to bother
people.
them. Right. I don't want to
Mhm.
bother them. And I say,
Mhm.
okay. Well, let me ask you this. I want you to imagine that you have a job right now. I always have this conversation with a person. And I say, okay, you have this job. And then someone you haven't spoken to in about a year reaches out to you and they're asking you for help. They're asking you if you can point them in the right direction. What would you say? And they always go,
Mhm.
of course I would help them. I said, okay, how
Right.
would that make you feel?
Yeah.
I said, oh, that would make me feel really good. Oh, okay, great. Then why are you robbing other people of that good feeling that
Right. Right.
that you're getting when you get to help someone?
Yeah.
Exactly the same language. I use it with people all the time, and,
Mhm.
and it always wakes them up. It always makes them go, huh, I guess I just haven't really pieced it together that
Thought
way.
of it that way. Yeah. And that's the part that honestly breaks my heart. I mean, as a keynote speaker, some of my most popular talks this year have been on this very idea. I hear leaders and, executives say, my team, they operate in silos. That's the word I get all the time. Silos. They operate in silos. They don't collaborate. They don't have the difficult conversations until things hit a boiling point. We're not talking to each other. So then I'll talk to members of the team and I'll say, do you see the value of collaboration? And they use exactly those words. They say, no, of course, I want to collaborate. I want to brainstorm. I want to innovate, but I don't want to bother people. We're also, I don't want to bother people. And that synonymous grouping of like collaboration has become the same as bothering people. Breaks my heart. That needs to get untangled, broken, torn into pieces, and reassembled, because we've lost our plot a little bit when it comes to the way we think about teamwork anymore. If any basic teamwork has become I'm bothering people, we got some work to do. Right? We have repair to do.
Right. And so people who listen to this, of course, they could hear, I want to be open to if someone comes to me, right? And I want to be able to respond. what I also think is important is how you are intentional about this, meaning being proactive, like you were saying earlier, Henna. So you're busy. You have so much on your plate. You, before we even started recording this, you were like, I was traveling here. You got a lot going on, right? So how do you make it for you personally? Like, how do you make it where you are quite intentional about that kind of outreach? Are there some ways in which you create, I don't know, like a system or a way of documenting, or I don't know, like what gets you to motivates you to be able to make sure it stays front of mind?
Yeah. And I think, in general, I have one of those jobs where social outreach is built in a little bit, but where it becomes more of a priority and intentional activity for me when it comes to my personal friendships. I'm
Yeah.
very, very grateful that my job has kept me busy, but it can become so busy to the point where people whose friendship I value, college friends, just deep, long friendships, there was a period where it was starting to take a back seat. So, I implemented just a very simple rule for myself, which I gave myself a goal of, 5 outreaches per week. Now, outreach could be a phone call. It could be an audio message, right? I tried to make it not a text, right? So an audio message, hey, Beth, it's been a while. Just thinking of you today. I saw something funny. It made me think of you. I just wanted to see what was up, miss you. Sometimes I send like a video, right? Depending on the level of friendship. But 5 touches per week for people who I value became kind of like my minimum. And sometimes it's 1 a day on a weekday. Sometimes it's all 5 on a Friday because Monday through Thursday kicked my butt, right? But I make it like a very minimum point to do that. I also try to leverage my driving time or airport time for connection. I'm not one of those people that can get like work done in an airport. I just too much going on. I don't focus. But I don't find it difficult to have just catch up time with someone. So I will often, if I know I'll have some airport time, I might shoot a text or a voice message to a friend, say, hey, I'll be at the airport from this time to this time. Do you have time for like a 5 or 10 minute catch up? This is actually really key though. It's a small window that we set. Because remember what I said about activation energy. Sometimes it's like, oh God, I haven't caught up with that person in so long. I feel like we're going to need like 30 minutes or it's going to feel rushed, right? That feels overwhelming for anyone. So if you are trying to rebuild your social muscle, you don't need to start with an hour-long dinner, right? Could it be, hey, it's been a while since we've caught up. Do you have like a 10-minute window on this day? Now, inevitably, we end up talking for longer than that. But the fact that we set the standard of what our expectations are as small makes it more likely that we actually do it. Because all of us are dealing with this. In the study, I refer to it as social muscle atrophy. We don't typically, not all of us do this as much as we used to. So if we set the stakes too big, we won't do it at all. So instead, we set it as small. Hey, girl, can we have a 5-minute catch up? I'll be at the airport during this window. Any chance you're free if I call you then? The fact that we start with 5 minutes means it's easier for us to both show up. And then if it really is 5 minutes, so be it. But sometimes 5 minutes turns into 20 and we're like, oh, so good to catch up with you, right? But it's building in the structure. It's building in the space for social initiation where it won't naturally exist. We do not have water cooler run-in the way we used to. If you're not working in an office, you don't have that hallway knowledge transfer anymore. So even if you work in a corporation, we have to create intentional spaces for this stuff now.
Yeah. And I think that it of course creates or it makes it easier for the other person to commit when it's shorter, but also helps you to work through your own discomfort as you schedule it, right? To say I tell myself it's only 5 minutes and it's like, you could talk yourself through it. It's only 5 minutes. I can manage through 5 minutes, And I think that being intentional that way is so valuable. And anyone listening who hears this and says, well, that sounds good, but even 5 people a week sounds like a lot for me. That's nonsense. Okay. Henna's very busy. All right. She makes it happen. She's a very busy person. All right. You got a lot going on. You got your books, you got your LinkedIn learning, you got a lot going on and you're making it happen. And I think that when we consider, right, what we heard in the story earlier about Andy, I think that he struggles with a lot of this too. He struggles with the sense of being isolated and not asking for help. He goes through the same routines over and over and over again. And let's say he is on LinkedIn and he goes through your LinkedIn learning course, feels inspired by it, but wants to take it to the next step and actually want to connect with you. And you get on a call with him and he's telling you his story. He's telling you what he's going through. You listen, you acknowledge what he's going through. And rather than just spit out some advice, you may want to ask him a question or two just to learn more, to help him through and help him to be able to see things for himself. What would you ask Andy? What would be the questions you'd ask him?
So I think the very first question I would ask is what I would want to discover. Let me tell you why I'd be asking it is, what assumptions is he holding on to about outreach or connection? And so one of the ways I try to get underneath of people's assumptions is I ask them to look for the evidence. So let's just say that Andy says, I want to reach out to, this old colleague of mine, but I feel like they're so busy. I haven't talked to them in a while. I don't even know that they want to talk to me. So one of my favorite evidence gathering questions is this: is that true? Said by who? And I would ask him to answer that. Is that true? Said by who? So is that true? Well, he probably doesn't know that for sure. Said by who? Nobody, probably just him and his storytelling mind, right? And so I think it would be an exercise in surfacing some of the assumptions that he's holding on to and asking for evidence. So asking, what are some of the things that you think are true about this outreach, that they don't have time, that, it's a bother, that they would be like, why is this bozo reaching out to me? I haven't talked to him in years. All these little things that I guess are the lingering anxieties or concerns. Let's list them out one by one and then put that question on as a filter. Is that true? Is there evidence of this? If there is, valid, right? But often there isn't. And then said by who? Did they say that to you? Did they say they'd have no interest in catching up with you? Do you know that for a fact? Did they say that to a friend of yours? Where are we getting it from? And so I just think that one question is a powerful filter to run all worries and hesitations through. What it does is it takes the emotion out of it a little bit, right? It takes the storytelling out of it. It takes the drama out of it. It takes us back to what is fact? What is neutral right now? What is the truth right now? And it helps us take that next tiny right step. We're not swinging to toxic positive. We're not swinging to, oh my God, they're going to be so happy to hear from me. I don't know that yet. But are they going to hate that you reached out, right? Are they going to say, what a waste this guy is? No, there's no evidence of that. So let's plant a little seed. Let's ask for 5 minutes. Quick catch up, right? Something small. And typically just that challenge of assumption is a great first step.
Yeah, I love it. Is that true? Said by who? I love it because it could also be a question that you can use for yourself at any time, right? You could just use that. Or self-reflection. Of course, having someone else do it with you is very valuable, but feel free to use that tool for yourself. And I want to thank you for your time today. This was such an amazing conversation. For anyone listening, we're going to have in the show notes a link to your book, Good Awkward. You mentioned to me that the hardcover is almost sold out. So I think this will be out. Hopefully there'll be some copies left before we publish this episode.
There's a few left, but then paperback comes out in June. So if you want the hardcover, grab it now. Paperback will release in June.
Okay, cool. And then you also mentioned the report earlier, the Social Muscle Report. We're going to have that link to that report right into our show notes as well. And then the 2 LinkedIn learning courses, anyone can access. They can go through LinkedIn. If you're not so much of a reader, you like to have more of an interactive video type of course, you have that on LinkedIn as well. So Henna, thank you again for your time today. This was amazing. I'm so glad we did this.
Such a blast. Thank you for having me.
For every one of these conversations that I have with a guest, I do prepare for them. But very often, the conversation goes in a direction I never thought it would. And that's what happened here with Henna, where we started to get into the importance of social interaction. And I found it to be incredibly valuable. I felt like I could talk to her for another hour about this. But less is more, I guess, at times. And so I'm going to do my best to synthesize this down into our 3 insights and our 3 actionable takeaways. The first insight: great leaders make an effort around what makes them an attractive person. So often you hear what you shouldn't do as a leader. Don't micromanage. Don't give feedback in public in a negative way where people are feeling ashamed and all that. There's some value to those things. But the lever that she's encouraging you to pull is one where you can work on being more self-aware, emotionally intelligent, transparent, vulnerable, being able to address mistakes effectively. Those are the things that matter most. Second insight: optimization is not the same for everyone. You need to define optimization for yourself. She talked through how her morning may look different than someone else's. And there is no perfect morning routine that applies to everyone. Don't see the world through someone else's filter. Only look at it through yours to be able to determine and discern how you can optimize the way in which you get yourself ready each day, how you charge yourself. It has to be unique to you. Third insight. We're not lonely. We get comfortable in aloneness. What a really good distinction that was that she made. We can so easily fall into isolation because it's convenient. The structures around us make it so you can just be all alone, isolated. And it isn't that you then get lonely, because you have some ways in which you interact through social media and whatnot, but you're missing a crucial part of being human, and then it becomes uncomfortable for you to engage. So you have to be able to proactively engage in a meaningful way so that you don't fall into that deep, deep comfort zone. And remember that when you do reach out to people, don't assume that you're bothering them. Because then it's just like you're there saying, I don't want to bother them. They're over there saying they don't want to bother you. And then there's no engagement, right? There's no connection, and you stay isolated, and things get stuck. You fall into stagnation. Actionable takeaways. Here we go. First one. Know your mental blocks. Know your mental blocks. You will execute better when you are more aware of them. So be intentional about this. Be mindful of what's really holding you back in those moments. And as Henna said, she used the example of a coach that gave her insight. Rely on others to help you here. It's very hard sometimes to see it on our own. We need someone else to give us that outside perspective to help us work through our own mental blockers. Second actionable takeaway, small social push-ups. I like how she termed this. Make it a priority to have these little interactions, whether that's the barista at Starbucks, the person at the grocery store who's checking you out, whatever it is. Make it where it's an intentional action, but start small. And she even referred to how you can set a target for yourself, having 5 outreaches a week, but keep them small. Set these small expectations so it doesn't feel overwhelming to you or to the other person. Third actionable takeaway, question your assumptions. Remember that question she asked, which is that true? Said by who? Is that true? Said by who? Is there actual evidence to the assumption that you're making? And what you're going to find very often is that there isn't any evidence. It's just a story you're telling yourself that's keeping you stuck. And so when you're able to ask a question like that, it hopefully helps you to break through and be able to take that uncomfortable action. Join us on Friday's episode. I'm going to break down how to ask for help. I think you hear that and you go, okay, Jay, I'm bought in. I want to ask for help more. I want to do more outreach. Well, how do you do it? What are the steps that you take? How do you frame the conversation? And I have a framework that I'm going to be sharing with you that's simple. It isn't too difficult to execute. And what it does, it allows for you to not feel inferior when you ask or not feel desperate, and to approach it in a way that makes it so the other person is excited to help you. That's going to come out on Friday. Until next time, thank you so much for listening.